Hello, greetings. Hi, hello. Hi, good evening. Okay, let's start then. Good evening, greetings everyone, everywhere. I hope you are doing well. Welcome to continuation, session 8 of the praises. So I hope you remember last time. I hope you have a memory of last time's session, because now we are going to pick up where we left off. Last session on stanza 38. So we are now on the chapter, or chapter is, there's no chapter, there's no chapters, but we are now on the section on meditation. So we talked about stanza 38 last time. Starts the first part, how to meditate on the five senses, starting with the sense of the visual sense. So, however, as I explained last time, we must always start with learning about refuge, taking refuge, generating bodhicitta, the heart of enlightenment for all sentient beings, and go through the the foundational practice. Otherwise, this kind of meditation probably will not lead to what you think it will. That's very important to understand. I think I covered that a lot last time. I suggest you can listen. It's very important. Really very important, actually. So, once we have well-established refuge, and will generate the mind of compassion, bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment for all sentient beings, with that foundation, then we meditate, we practice. We practice to purify these veils, these we do illusory practice to purify these illusory veils that are veiling this naturally, spontaneously present, luminous mind, or the pure Dharmadhatu. So, now we start with stanza 39. 39 says, when sound and ear assume the right relation, a consciousness free of thoughts occurs. These three are in essence the Dharmadhatu, free of characteristics. But they become hearing when thought of conceptually. So basically, this is a sort of the similar structure as the previous stanza, but now applied to the hearing consciousness, to the hearing faculty. When sound, the object, and the ear, the faculty, the the hearing faculty, when they're functioning correctly together, something arises, right? So basically what this is saying, it's saying that the same I explained before in relation to the vision is now applied to sound, exactly the same way. So these three, as before in the case of vision, these three, the sound, the ear, and the hearing consciousness, these three are none other than the Dharmadhatu itself. That's what Nagarjuna is saying. These three are in essence the Dharmadhatu, by themselves, primordially pure. However, when labeling and mentation, so mentation, remember this word, gradually we've been kind of using this word, mentation, this functioning of the intellect. So when labeling and mentation gets mixed with this pure appearance of the sound, it becomes hearing. That's what Nagarjuna is saying there. And then when it becomes like this, it becomes hearing. And then we are entering into dualism. Now we are entering into this dualistic ordinary mind. But before we enter into this dualistic ordinary mind, just that itself is pure. It appears, it is completely empty of any substantial existence, but it appears, just like the vision, similar to the sound, exactly the same way. Exactly the same way. Spontaneously, naturally appears. When we start to conceptualize, to project, to impute, now we are talking about hearing. I'm hearing this, I'm hearing that. And it becomes, the sounds become concepts. Or even, if we speak about language, then it's even much more developed than that, right? Like this. But just the sound, the pure sound is pure sound. And if we drop even this duality of subject that hears and sound that appears, it is just an empty appearance. Like that. So it is basically, if you understood the principle, as I explained it in more detail last time on stanza 38. So that's kind of the reference point, right? So if you understand that, now you apply the same principle to the other five senses, right? So that's why now I'm going to go through the next stanzas all together, because they're all the same. So, and then it says, stanza 40, dependent upon the nose and an odor, one smells. And as with the example of form, there is neither arising nor cessation, but in dependence upon the nose consciousness experience, the Dharmadhatu is thought to be a smell. So now just slightly different way of explaining, but again it's the same principle. Depending upon the nose and an odor, the object, one smells. But just like with the visual form example, in reality there is no object that is arising or ceasing. It is just an empty appearance that are based on interdependent arising conditions that is experience. But when we start, when we start, it's not a deliberate thing. So when we say if I say when we start to project, when I say when we start to project labels, it almost sounds like there's a choice. It almost sounds like there's a choice in the matter. It's not that easy, right? It's sort of involuntary. So when this projection and labeling occurs, this separation in subject and object, now we have, I'm smelling this, I'm smelling that, and it becomes an object. It becomes an object of perception, like this. But without this labeling, without this imaginary nature put on top of it, it is just a pure, empty appearance. We can't even speak of smell. Even to say that this experience is a smell, even that is already a mistake. It is just that what it is. Do you understand? That's the point that is being made here. But once we have this functioning of this projecting mind, then we say, this is the smell. This is the smell of this is the smell of that, this is a smell in general, right? Like that. But there is no such thing. Just an appearance in mind. That's all. So again, I'll come back. 41. I'll first do them all. 41. The tongue's nature is emptiness. The sphere of taste is voidness as well. These are in essence the Dharmadhatu, and are not the causes of taste consciousness. That's so taste. Then 42. The pure body's essence, the characteristics of the object touched, the tactile consciousness free of conditions. These are called the Dharmadhatu too. I'm adding these two. This is also the Dharmadhatu. So now putting it all this sort of together. So the same is to be taken into account for all the senses. Same principle. When looking at things in this way, we speak of conditions, right? So we speak of conditions like, for example, the eye faculty and the eye consciousness and form, right? Eye faculty, eye consciousness, and visual form. Or smell faculty, smell form, smell consciousness, whatever. But whatever it is, these are just interdependent arisings, and they're all empty of self-nature, all of them. They come together, they arise together, or they appear to arise together. How? Because of the force of these latent habitual tendencies, these seeds in the alaya vijnana. So, due to these seeds in the alaya vijnana, they seem to arise. And they appear, but they are empty. They are empty, but they appear. All the time, they are never anything else other than the mind's own lucid, empty clarity. Whatever it is, it never moves from the great expanse, from the Dharmadhatu. That is the point that is being made here. You understand? So, due to the tendencies, when we get to the next one, it will become more developed, but in brief. Due to the tendencies in the alaya vijnana, these seeds ripen, and they ripen as this: the visual faculty, visual consciousness, visual form. And they appear, but they are empty of self-nature, but they appear. And in this, they never move from this space of the Dharmadhatu. They are nothing else than the luminous nature, the luminous empty nature of mind itself, appearing in this way. That's what this is saying. And in order to realize this, because remember, of course, this is the instructions on meditation, so this is not about philosophy. This is explaining how to meditate, to realize this, to come to a direct experiential realization that it is like this, right? To meditate. So, to meditate, how to meditate then? What is this instruction, basically, that is being explained here? The instruction, fundamentally, if I put it in a very simple term, we could summarize it as leave it be. Just leave it be. Whatever it is, just leave it be. So, just leave it be. However, in order to practice like this, of course, we need to have some capacity to abide undistracted and to also have some clarity of mind, of insight. Otherwise, it's very difficult to practice like this. This practice actually is not so easy. It is quite a bit high, Because if the mind is too distracted, if we have no capacity to abide a little bit and some clarity of insight, it's very difficult to practice this, actually, quite hard. That's why we have all these preliminary kind of foundational practices, to develop some kind of stability develop some kind of insight capacity, some clarity of the mind, to be able to meditate like this. Otherwise, very difficult. And this is also connected to conduct, actually. I spoke very briefly of conduct last time, of the importance of conduct. But this is directly present here, because if we don't have, if our conduct in life in general, if it's quite chaotic, quite negative, quite, behaving in very strange ways and unvirtuous ways, our mind becomes very disturbed. Our life becomes very disturbed, and our mind becomes very disturbed. Our energy becomes very disturbed. And how can we meditate? Very difficult, especially for beginners, very difficult. So the coming together of conduct, of having a proper discipline of conduct in daily life, that comes together with this, the refuge, bodhicitta, the foundational practices, all these comes together. You see that there's kind of a way how this kind of practice, or this kind of path sort of comes together. So we can actually then practice like this kind of meditation. Otherwise, it's very difficult. Because, of course, if the mind is completely wild, like a wild mind, wild monkey mind, completely very hard to stay stable for even 1 second, then we cannot notice anything. Because to practice these instructions that are explained here, we need to be able to sit there without following after projection, even to just notice. That's why I say also here about insight, to develop some clarity of insight. Because if we don't have any clarity of insight, then to even notice what's going on within our mind is quite difficult. It's very blurry, What's happening inside here? I'm not really sure, What's happening in my mind? I'm not really sure. I was thinking about this a moment ago, but then I forgot. Now I don't know what I was thinking. What's happening inside? I'm not really sure. So to have some stability and to have some clarity of insight is fundamental, actually. Like this. And that's why all this, also these foundational practices, is very important to come to that kind of place. Otherwise, this you can't apply this, actually. It's impossible. But if we can apply this, so the easy way to understand this, just leave it be. Leave it be. Appearances, like visual appearances, sound appearances, smell appearances, just leave it be. Leave it be. In that way, we can remain present in this self-clarity of mind, in mind self-clarity, and leaving the appearances, leaving the sense appearances in their own condition. To leave the sense appearances in their abiding naturally in their own condition without altering anything. Pure, free from concept, naturally present. Things are just there. Appearances are just there. Empty and clear. Clear because they clearly appear, empty because there's no self-nature to them. To leave them like that, without fixating, without rejecting, without engaging, without projecting, just leave it be. That's, in a simple way, what these instructions are regarding the 5 senses. Because even this process, or even this thought of something arising, like a smell arising, or a visual form arising, something arising, even that is just a conceptual idea. We say like, oh, this feeling is arising, or this smell is arising, or this taste is arising. But even that is just a conceptual idea. There is no such arising. Everything that is appearing in the sphere of the 5 senses, it is just naturally, spontaneously there. Moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. Each moment fresh. Each moment fresh. Complete in itself. Pure. No label. Clear. If we are able to do that, to abide in that way, that's the aspect of meditation based on the 5 senses that Nagarjuna is explaining here, like this. Okay. Then we move on. But of course, I mean, you can, when you kind of learning, you can experience, you can experiment, or you can kind of train, like just to try to apply that to, like, to one sense, for example, to try to like relax with the visual sense, for example, you know, and try to apply it like this. And you can start there. And then when you can relax a little bit with the visual sense without fixating, without rejecting, without grasping, without projecting, then you can open up, you know, your mind and include all the senses. It's not like you're doing, it's not like, you can start like that, but it's not like you're doing, like, how to say, it's not like this is talking about 5 meditations, okay? This is all together at the same time, yeah? Are the 5 senses somehow connected? Yes, but that's not relevant here. Yeah, yes, but it's not relevant here. This is just how to meditate, okay? There's no point. That's just more conceptualization. There's no need to conceptualize. We're trying to step away from conceptualization. No need to add more. Because again, this is not about philosophy. This is practical, you know, how to meditate. You know? Okay, 43. So now it's the second section of the 7. So the first was how to meditate based on the 5 senses. And now is the second section, how to meditate based on mental appearances. So B212, stanza 43. So we have the first part was about the 5 senses, the 5 sensory perceptions, and now it's about the mental consciousness. So how to meditate based on mental appearances. But again, I want to repeat this once again. These are not 5 or 6 or 7 different meditations, okay? We're explaining one of these pieces at a time, and you can even kind of experiment individually with one or another. But the idea is that as the meditation itself, this is just one, okay? It's all together. Okay. So 43. The phenomena that appear to mental consciousness, the chief of them all, so the chief of all the consciousnesses. So the phenomena that appear to the mental consciousness, the chief of them all, are conceptualized and then superimposed. When this activity is abandoned, phenomena's lack of self-essence is known. Knowing this, meditate on the Dharmadhatu. So, the phenomena that appear to mental consciousness are conceptualized and then superimposed. When you abandon that process of conceptualizing and superimposing, phenomena, the actual essence, the actual nature of this phenomena is known. And in that knowing itself is the meditation on the Dharmadhatu. That's what it's saying here. First in brief. So there's a very important aspect here, which is knowing this. So the phenomena that appear to mental consciousness are conceptualized and then superimposed. When this is abandoned, then the real nature of the phenomena is known, right? Knowing this, it says, knowing this, meditate on the Dharmadhatu. So this is very important. It means that in this aspect of the mental consciousness, the meditation on Dharmadhatu is knowing this, or knowing what? Knowing the lack of self-essence of the appearances. It is a knowing. I'm not sure. Anyway, if this is a bit too difficult for you to understand right now, just remember that this is important, and at some point maybe you remember, or you can come back here later. Because I'm giving these explanations, but until you develop some real experience in meditation, a lot of the things that I'm talking about here is just blah, 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 just words, okay? So you are going to have to meditate a lot. And as you meditate a lot, and you start to develop some experience about your mind, then a lot of these things that I'm talking about here will start to kind of click, like, oh yeah, oh, like this. It becomes real somehow, it becomes alive, it becomes a real experience, so to speak. And that's of course what we need, right? Otherwise it's just words. So a lot of the things that I'm saying now, and a lot of the things that I will be saying now, next, are probably quite abstract, and are probably quite, you won't probably completely understand, but just try to remember, or at least try to remember a little bit and try to understand a little bit, keep it in mind, because then as you meditate, you come back to this, and you need to start to put the dots together in your own experience of your practice. Okay, that's really the point. Meditation instructions, especially so detailed like these ones, it's always like this. It's too much, it's too much. You have to practice and then come back to the instructions and sort of connect the instructions with your experience until you, oh yeah, that's what that is, So, and this one is quite difficult. So I'm going to repeat it one more time, just so at least you remember it. So, when this process of conceptualization and projection of mental phenomena is abandoned, phenomena's lack of self-essence is known, right? So that's what it says there in the stanza. Phenomena's lack of self-essence is known. Or in other words, you'll come to know the empty nature of the phenomena, of the appearance. Then the last stanza, last line, knowing this, meditate on the Dharmadhatu. That means that the meditation, there's a knowing. Is a knowing of the real nature of the appearance. Okay? It is not just a state of absence. It is not just a mental blank. Okay? It is not a mental blank. It's very direct there. Knowing this. Knowing what? Knowing the absence of self-essence, or the emptiness of real nature, or knowing the real nature, whatever we say, however we say it, is knowing that. That is the meditation on the Dharmadhatu. Okay, there's a knowing. Anyway, I just had to stress that point. Maybe when it makes sense to you, you remember this. Otherwise, sometimes people fall into a kind of meditation that is just kind of an empty mind, kind of starting that it's a mind that drifts into just blank without knowing anything, and that is wrong meditation. Okay. it may start like that a little bit in the first part, where it says when this activity is abandoned. So when a person is trying to abandon this conceptualization and superimposing, it may happen that it feels a little bit, or it may even happen that goes a little bit into this kind of, empty thing. But that should only be a temporary thing at best, until this knowing arises, which is the vipassana aspect, actually. It's the clarity aspect of the vipassana that knows the real nature of the phenomena, or the lack of self-nature of the phenomena. And it is that knowing that's the meditation. Okay? Otherwise you fall into just blank, empty space. And that's not it. That will not lead you anywhere. This is a very serious mistake. Okay? That people that are not properly trained sometimes can fall into this error. So that's why I'm kind of stressing this a lot. Even if you don't relate to this instruction right now, just keep it there, for later. Okay, so that's just the first introduction. This part requires a bit more explanation. So this stanza is, of course, about mind, or the mental appearances, right? So the first, the before was about the five senses. Now it's about the mental consciousness. So here, when we are talking, so the instructions here are very much, of course, in line with what we would expect to find in the type of teachings in the Third Turning Sutra, and even very much in line with what we would later call the Yogacara type of teachings. But we don't need to go into that kind of terminology right now. Just so practical explanation. So when we're talking about mind here, because now we're talking about mental consciousness, right? Mental consciousness. There are two aspects that we can consider. It is from the point of view of the Alaya Vijnana, right? The Alaya Vijnana, the ground consciousness, as being the condition for arising of mind. So that's one aspect. So the Alaya Vijnana as the condition through which this mental consciousness arises. Another aspect is the afflicted mind that clings to self. So that affliction aspect that we spoke about before, if you remember. The afflicted aspect that mistakenly considers this ground consciousness as a self and appears as this self thing, self-subject. There's these two aspects that we can kind of consider here. So it's in the context of this stanza 43, the meditation on mental consciousness, is important to explore this. It's important to explore this a little bit in more detail. So in this stanza in general, it is speaking about these phenomena that appear to mental consciousness. And Nagarjuna uses there the expression, the chief, I think, right? Yeah, the chief of them all. So this mental consciousness, the chief of them all, he says like this. That's also because sometimes the sixth consciousness, the mental consciousness, is also referred to as main mind. Sometimes in some texts you'll find, I think I also spoke about this before, main mind. You find this term, main mind. When you hear this term, main mind, it's talking generally about the sixth consciousness, mental consciousness. Well, yeah, I come into that. So if you remember this model we spoke about before, we talked about these 8 consciousnesses, right? So we have the 5 sensory consciousnesses, we have the 6, this 6 consciousness, which is the mental consciousness, which I was talking about. And then there's the seventh consciousness, which is this the afflicted aspect that fixates on the alaya vijnana as being a truly existing thing and projects the idea of a self upon it, right? So then there's the eighth consciousness, which is the alaya vijnana itself, the ground consciousness with all these latent seeds from which these seven consciousnesses arise. So of all these, this stanza in particular now is mostly speaking about the alaya vijnana together with mental consciousness, or the sixth consciousness, which arises from it. That's the main sort of thing we're working with here, okay, in this stanza. In other words, the alaya vijnana is the place of arising of the mental consciousness. So, because the alaya vijnana is the place of arising of mental consciousness, it is the principal condition for the arising of mental consciousness, which is called the main mind. So, the objects of mental consciousness are several types. So we have mental consciousness, and mental consciousness as its objects. Okay? So what are these objects? Well, there are different kinds of objects of mental consciousness. We have, for example, the form aggregates, we have mental forms, we have feeling forms, we have discrimination forms, we have the mental events, we have certain meditative states, and there's more things, but it doesn't matter for now. So I'm just trying to make a point here. So all of these appear to mental consciousness, right? So the form aggregates, the mental forms, feeling forms, all these appears to mental consciousness. So the alaya vijnana in this teaching in particular is presented as being the main condition for the arising of mental consciousness. And we call this the main mind. The objects are all the objects that appear to this main mind. So this mental consciousness, what is this mental consciousness? This mental consciousness is that I'm gonna put it the other way around. So this mental consciousness is that which is absent from certain states. Okay, so I'm putting it in reverse. So this mental consciousness is that which is not there. Okay, the aspect of consciousness, or the consciousness that is not there in some states, like, for example, deep sleep, when fainting, when becoming unconscious. These are the ordinary three states in which mental consciousness is not there. Deep sleep, when fainting, or when becoming unconscious for whatever reason. In those three cases, mental consciousness is not there. Special cases is the state of what we call the state of cessation, right? So from the perspective of, when you speak of the Four Noble Truths, for example, we speak of cessation, right? The truth of cessation. In the state of cessation, there's no mental consciousness. And then there's also certain meditation states where the mental consciousness is also absent. But those you don't know, right? Those two you don't know, I think. So unless you're already enlightened, you don't know. So, but the other three you can know or understand. So the deep sleep, fainting, and unconscious. So in these three states, mental consciousness is that which is absent, is not there. So from this perspective, we can also say that the mental consciousness it is connected with the flow of all the six consciousnesses. So when a person is in a special state of meditation, for example, where this is stopped, or in deep sleep, the mental consciousness is not present. It's really not present. It's gone. It's really gone, actually. It's not just asleep. It's gone. However, what is still there is the alaya vijnana, the eighth consciousness, the ground consciousness. That's there. And when the conditions appear, or when the conditions manifest, the mental consciousness arises again. That's why I said that in the beginning of the text, I said that this thing that we call the main mind, or sometimes mentation, is that underlying alaya vijnana, or the state of consciousness that is present in the moment just after any of the six consciousness has passed and before the next of them arises. So when any moment of these six consciousnesses ends and before the next one arises, in between, what's there? In between, what's there? So you have this continuum of the six consciousnesses: visual consciousness, hearing consciousness, mental consciousness, like moment to moment to moment, this continuum. There's a moment of consciousness that ends, and then there's another one. In between, what's there? It's the alaya vijnana. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to explain here. This alaya vijnana, by itself, it has no stains, in the sense that at that point, there is no doer present, there is no agent, there is no I. And it is the source from which the other consciousness comes forth. Now, the problem here is the other aspect I already, of course, spoke before, which is this afflicted aspect that incorrectly clings to a self, that clings to the alaya vijnana as being a self. This aspect of consciousness is ignorant, is ignorance by nature. And it is due to this ignorance that mind does not see the alaya vijnana for what it truly is. And it projects upon it this self. And then it grasps to that self as being me. And it appears to all these imaginary forms as other things. So we speak on this level of this eight consciousness, but we should understand that this is just an explanation on the relative level. I think I said this before. In reality, we don't have eight minds, okay? Obviously, right? In reality, we don't have eight minds. So all this is present within the ground consciousness and never moves away from the alaya vijnana, from the ground consciousness. Okay? So the very fact that we seem to be able to distinguish as being separate things, I mean, all these other seven consciousness, so the very fact that we can separate, we can distinguish these seven consciousnesses itself, that distinction itself is part of the ignorance. Okay, do you understand what I'm trying to say? Even that distinction is part of the ignorance. Okay. So, in this way, there are the mental defilements that manifest because of this ignorance and the afflicted mind. So these defilements that we speak about all the time, they are manifesting because of this afflicted mind as the ripening of the seeds of the alaya vijnana. But these are totally illusory. And this is the imputed nature or the imaginary nature that we spoke about before. And then there is the mental consciousness itself that is fixed on mental objects that appear to it. So this mental consciousness that fixates on these objects that appear to it, all this process, that is just interdependent arising. It is just the process of interdependent arising. And because it is just the process of interdependent arising, it is completely empty of self-nature. It appears, but it has no self-essence. There is this ground consciousness, the alaya vijnana, which is the movement, activation of all these latent tendencies, both positive latent tendencies or seeds, and negative, positive and negative seeds. They get activated. So when we understand this, we can see that nothing ever moves away from this mind itself. And all that being dependent arising, it is empty of true nature. So mind itself, in this sense, as seen as this interplay of the eight consciousness, is itself interdependent arising. And as such, it is unproduced and unceasing beyond the four extremes. In other words, it is emptiness. It lacks self-nature. So this mind itself, when realized for what it truly is, it is the Dharmadhatu. Do you get it? That's the point. This mind itself, when realized for what it truly is the Dharmadhatu. That's the point. So we explain it in this way, right? So to summarize, we have this alaya vijnana, which is the seeds, the flow of seeds that are activated, and they manifest as for example, the mental consciousness and these objects. This is both manifestation from the alaya vijnana, do you understand? And together with this afflicted aspect that projects a self to this process, where there is no self. All that is just this interplay. The appearance of this these mental forms itself is the imaginary nature. And the process itself through which all this appears is the dependent nature. It's just interdependently arising. But it never moves from the alaya vijnana itself. Okay? So, to summarize, what we call mental consciousness is that which is not there when you're asleep. That's mental consciousness. But what is there? What is there is the alaya vijnana. When you go to sleep, the sense consciousnesses, they shut down one by one. And then the mental consciousness also dissolves. Basically all these other consciousnesses, they all dissolve back into the alaya vijnana. And that's what we would call the state of deep sleep. We can also call it the state of deep ignorance. It's the same thing, you know. It's the same thing. State of deep ignorance. And when, due to causes and conditions, the natural liveliness of mind itself, when there's rising again, then mental consciousness manifests again, together with then the sensory consciousnesses and so on, from the alaya vijnana. It never moves from there. Okay, so that's what we call the mental consciousness. It is that thing that is the difference between when you are awake and when you're asleep. Together with its objects, obviously, right? Together with its objects. Okay, so what I was trying to get to here. So but because all of this is a process of interdependent arising, and as we already studied a lot right before, everything that is interdependent arising is empty of self-nature, right? So that what you call mind from a samsaric perspective, which is this interplay of the eight consciousnesses, is interdependent arising. So it is empty of self-nature. So when you realize that, knowing that, the knowing of that, then that's the meditation. Because then you discover this, what is Dharmadhatu. That's the point here. Right? So in this stanza, Nagarjuna basically saying that first, when we analyze through reasoning and through explanations like we are doing now, we conclude that the movement of these eight consciousnesses is empty of true existence. That is something we can achieve through reasoning and analysis and investigation. And also that all the defilements lack self-nature and are just mere imaginations. Once we have this kind of understanding, we can let go of the activity of conceptualizing, superimposing, judging, grasping. Because what's difficult about this is that while we keep having a very strong belief, while we keep having a very strong idea on the true existence of self and other, the true existence of my mind, my thoughts, my feelings, other things, other objects, while we have this all very strong fixation, it's very difficult to practice this, or impossible actually, I would say. So first we sort of through hearing teachings like this, reading, studying, reflecting, through reasoning, we come to understand the empty nature of all this, the empty nature of the appearances, the empty nature of mental forms, imaginary nature, and so forth. And the more we reflect upon these things, the more we hear these teachings, the more we analyze, the more we reflect, it sort of creates a space. It sort of creates a relaxation, I would say, as well. It sort of creates a letting go. Because our fixation is not so strong anymore. Our grasping is not so strong anymore. And within that spaciousness, that sort of relaxation, then we can gradually let go of this process of conceptualizing, superimposing, labeling, judging, grasping, fixating, rejecting, grasping, rejecting, grasping, rejecting, grasping, rejecting, judging, conceptualizing, projecting, and we let go of that. We gradually let go of that. And then, through that, then the true nature of mind, or the realization of the empty nature of mind and phenomena will be directly experienced. And when we experience that, then you realize what is the true nature of the mind. And that is the Dharmadhatu. And that realization, that seeing, that knowing of the true nature of what is the Dharmadhatu, that is the meditation. That is the explanation of meditation in relation to mental consciousness that Nagarjuna is explaining here. So we need to get to that. So whatever appears to mind, so you apply it to the senses, and now you apply it to mind the same way. Whatever appears to mind, don't grasp, don't reject, don't modify. Don't grasp, don't reject, don't modify. Just let it be. Remain in presence, in clear presence. Of course, I understand it's not so easy to do. That's why I said we need kind of a background. We need to have a training to start with a refuge. There's a reason for all these things. Otherwise, it's quite difficult, But the thing itself is not so hard to understand. Whatever appears to mind, don't reject, don't fixate, don't modify. These three: grasping, pushing away, or trying to change. Okay? None of these. Just leave it be. And as you continue in that way, you at some point start to understand, start to directly see what is actually the real nature of this phenomena. And when that knowing arises, to remain within that knowing, that's called meditation. And that will take to realization. Okay, so that's a brief explanation of these six. This one that was a bit more complicated. I think I should not say any more, otherwise it gets more confusing. I hope it was clear enough. Any questions? If there are no questions, I will finish here for today. No questions? Okay, if while sitting, yes. Yes. That's correct. It is. And then you feel this this impulse to move arises. This impulse, this desire, this desire to move appears. Then immediately together with that arises the I that recognizes that, the subject that notices this desire, I want to move. Right? So here's the desire, then here's the I. It kind of appears together. The desire to move. I looks at that. Okay, I want to move. And now you are in this duality, kind of relating to that appearance from this I that arises. And then if you move, if you say, okay, I move, now that action will put another seed in the alive vision. If you say, no, I will not move, I reject, I refuse to move, that also will put another seed in the in the life. Do you understand? Stability, yes, stability is very important. You know, yeah, stability. This is why I keep saying, I mean, it's very useful to learn these instructions of meditation so we can start practicing. But this needs to be supported. It needs to be supported with refuge. I keep repeating this because I'm not sure people understand how fundamental that is to stability, to everything. Refuge, bodhicitta, the foundational practices, just like conduct, all of these things. Because if our mind is so distracted by worldly concerns all the time, and so much believing in true existence, even at a conceptual level, and so disturbed by all sorts of things, in a very gross manner, without having a profound understanding. I'm speaking conceptually here, philosophically, actually, because that must be sort of a first step. If we don't have that, then to harness any stability is almost impossible. It's almost impossible. Somebody that has, if somebody would have a lot of faith, this happens sometimes. There's some people have a lot of faith, they have a lot of devotion in the Buddha and on their teacher, and the teacher tells them everything is empty of true existence, everything is illusory, do this, and it's just 100%. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. Then it's more easy. But most of us is not like this. We don't have this kind of trust, faith. So we need to listen to teachings. We need to reflect on the refuge, the bodhicitta, the training in impermanence, the teachings on emptiness, prajnaparamita. We need to go through all that to start to relax, to start to let go of grasping. Because without that, stability, forget about stability. I'm very honest, it's just fantasy, it's just fantasy. There's no possible to have stability because the mind is too fluctuating, it's too much. How shall I explain this? It's like a boat on the surface of the ocean. It's impossible to have stability. It's just going with the waves. What to do? We need to go above the ocean. And you can do that through understanding and reflection and slowly moving up, or if you can directly recognize what we in Dzogchen, for example, what we call Rigpa, then you can rise above much more easy, direct way. But even that requires some kind of confidence, which is also not easy. So no matter what, we need to have a good foundation. Any more questions? No more questions? Okay, if there's no more questions, we finish for today. And we continue again on Thursday. Okay, so have a good evening, and I'll see you next time.